the state of grace is, in my eyes, your ideal state of being. So the whole podcast is people that had challenges and then how did they reach their state of grace? Okay. And we want to know also what is your state of grace?
My wife wanted us to go to a couples retreat, just to kind of refresh, renew, and it was based on this theory of relationships called Imago and all of that. And it was in Pasadena, and it was over a weekend. It was so, and it was football season, and but I had to go, so I went. I wasn't really looking forward to going, and and they do all of these workshops and make you do these exercises with each other. And one of the exercises they wanted us to do was they gave us a little notebook and said, write things down that bother you about your spouse. Yeah. And I thought, oh my God, this is
not a good situation.
Minefield. Why don't I just go and step on a mine? And,
right.
And I'm staring at this blank page, just stumped. And meanwhile, Shelley is just writing furiously,
Oh no,
in her notebook. And I think I have to write something, because if I don't write anything, it's like I'm not taking the exercise seriously. But if I do write something, I don't want to get in trouble for it and everything. And so I got this block. And then just before there was pencils down, I thought of something. And I wrote down, this is, I don't like the way you make me late. And that was the only thing I wrote in the notebook. And as soon as I got to the end of that sentence, I thought, okay, I have an episode. This is
yeah.
And Shelley always, got used to it. All of the spouses on Raymond would get used to us culling from our lives episodes.
Yeah.
And for sometimes Shelley and we would be having a dispute about something, and she talks about this. She'd see my eyes kind of go off up here at one point. She'd go, "This is not for the show. This is not for the show." And then I'd say, "Yes, but honey, look how much they pay you for each episode." And she goes, "Okay, this is for the show."
Of course. She's very smart.
Yes. We'd artificially extend the argument just to get a second act,
That is hilarious.
So I said, I don't like the way you make me late. And so I came in the next Monday. I don't even remember all the complaints she had about me, but I just had focused on this. And it was a nice weekend, and all of that. So I come in Monday and I say, I think I got an idea, and I put it out there, and everybody related to it. Everybody had a story, and it didn't cut across gender lines. Like, it wasn't always the woman who was late. Sometimes the guy was late. And Phil Rosenthal, was the showrunner, talked about how when he's at a party and they're going to leave, he's standing by the door for a half hour while his wife does the goodbye tour.
Right.
To everybody, and everybody had a different story, but I didn't have a plot. It was a great theme. And for every story, there's three elements. There's character, obviously, there's plot, and there's theme. And usually you start with a plot, an incident, a conflict. Sometimes you start with like a character trait, like, okay, Ray's a hypochondriac. Let's do something about that. Very rarely do you start with a theme. That's the hardest way to start. And so I had this great theme that everybody obviously related to.
Yes.
I didn't have a plot. And I went to my friend in the next office, Aaron Schur, and I said, I'm having this dilemma. I've got this great theme, but no plot. And he didn't really have a total answer for me, but he said, a friend of mine in his family, had this thing called AIS. And it stood for ass in seat. And his father would set an AIS time. And if anybody whoever in the family wasn't in the car at the appointed ass in seat time would get left behind. And he said, so it always worked. Everybody was on time until apparently later in life, when his friend was grown up and a doctor and a pillar of the community, and his father said it has time and left without him. But anyway, we brought that idea into the room, and Phil Rosenthal, who's brilliant showrunner, when he heard that story, he said, "That's the act break. Ray leaves Deborah." And I did exactly that. I went, "Oh."
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
I actually kind of shivered. I go, "Oh my God, that is the greatest act break I've heard in my life." And the act break is important in a story because it's the thing that makes you come back. It's after the interview, after the commercial, the stakes have to be high. And if they're going to an event and she's not on time and Ray leaves her, it just, because I was thinking, oh my God, I could never do that.
Right.
And so this is why you write stories, because you can write about the things you would never do, but you can live vicariously about that. So as soon as he said that, I said, okay, I got it. All I know is I just need to set up to that point and then play out the consequences after that. And so, boom, Phil just saying Ray leaves Deborah for something. That was all I needed. So I went back, and the episode basically was Ray and Deborah having an argument about how she always makes him late. And she promises that she will, they're going to this sports awards show, and it's black tie event. And he's going to set an AIS time for 6 o'clock, and she's going to be there. She's promised. She said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize this meant so much to you. I'll be there." And so, he's downstairs. It's a few minutes before time. We just see Deborah touching up her hair. She's got a little hair curler, and she's just touching up, and she's about, yes, comedic cliffhanger is exactly what it is. And she's, she walks away. She puts down the thing, steps away from here, and then takes a step away, and then comes back. Just one more little thing, and the hair curler gets stuck in her hair.
Oh no.
And Ray is looking at his watch, and his brother and sister-in-law are babysitting, so they're waiting there. And he says, "Tell Deborah I'll be in the car." And he goes in the car, and she's trying desperately to get the thing out of her hair because she wants to be on time. And we cut to Ray in the car. Ding, 6 o'clock, his alarm goes off. He turns the key in the ignition, and the car starts. And we did this in front of a live audience, and you could hear the audience do the exact same thing you did and the exact same thing I did in the writer's room. They went, "Oh." And boom, he drives off, and everybody's, "Oh my God." And the second act is basically Ray at the awards show, and a couple of his buddies are there, and he's, "Where's Deborah?" "Well, I set the AIS time." He's very proud of himself, and they're going like, "Good for you, Ray. You did it." "Yes." "Yeah." And Ray's like, "Yeah." And then one of them says, "That's fantastic. I could never do that to my wife. She would kill me." And as soon as he says that, Ray goes, "Oh my God." He has his bridge on the River Kwai, Alec Guinness on the bridge of the River Kwai. He sees the train coming over the bridge. And that's what Ray has. And he all of a sudden starts spiraling like the character Ray and the real Ray would do about, "Oh my God, what did I do? What have I done? I can't go home now. I can't. She's going to be so mad. I'm going to have to join the witness protection program."
Yes.
Oh, and meanwhile, we cut back to Deborah back at the house with that thing still hanging in her hair. And Amy, the character, offers to help her get it out. She says, "No, we're leaving it here." So she spends the whole evening with this hanging out of her hair. And the parents come over and they hear the situation. And Ray comes in, and he is like humbled. And he's got a centerpiece from the banquet with wilted flowers in it as some sort of lame peace offering. And we had this discussion in the writer's room, because in an episode, you usually have the big scene where everything gets hashed out. It's an argument of some sort, and everything gets hashed out. And I said, we don't need that. We had that argument about this in the first act. I think it would be better if Deborah doesn't say anything to him. And that's the thing that drives him. He wants her to yell at him, but she doesn't. And
Ah,
people who are there as a buffer are eventually going to leave, and he's going to be alone with her. And he's so that was the horror story that is in his imagination what she's going to do. And they that's the way where
that was me. That was it's. I live in a busy street. Sorry about that.
and so that was your ride. And the
Yeah, my date.
yeah,
You just saw me from down there just now. Thanks. Passing on that.
and so he comes in with this lame, centerpiece, and everybody's yelling at him for why? How could you do that? And Ray says to his dad, "I did the AIS thing. You did that, when we were kids." He says, "Yeah, but I would never follow through with it. What are you, crazy? Marie would kill me." And so he
Oh my God.
realized his father never would have done it anyway. So he went and did it. And so everybody leaves. And he's standing there with Deborah, who's got the thing hanging out her hair. And she hasn't said anything to him. And he goes up the stairs like a dead man walking, like he's on execution row.
Oh yeah.
And he turns back to her at some point and says, are you coming? And she says, "I'll be up in a minute. Like, you're going to have to wait for me now." And the show ends just with a tag of Ray still sitting on the edge of the bed with the lame centerpiece in his hand, just kind of whimpering, going, "Ah, ah." That's how it all ends. And that's
That.
so I'll be doing, I'll probably be telling a story like that in my Substack. But that's one,
Yes.
that's a relationship thing from real life that we turned into an episode, and that continues to pay off. So
That is amazing. And it was just you go into like a couples therapy kind of workshop thingy and just got that idea. That's great.
yeah,
I love it. But
yeah.
you were always like thinking about could this be a good episode? So
Yes, yeah.
yeah,
Your antenna is out all the
yeah,
time, and uh, I I quote my friend Lou Schneider, who he was on a ski trip with his family,
yeah.
and they were in an elevator, and they had come from a hot tub. So they were in bathing suits, and all of their ski equipment was still in the car, and everything all they had packed was still in the car because they had arrived early. And he drops his keys in the slot of the elevator, the car keys, where everything, all the equipment and all of their clothes and suitcases are.
Ooh,
He's trying to fetch the thing out of the slot while the door keeps closing, and his wife is holding the door open and he's cursing.
no.
But she's hip to the fact that when bad things happen, it could be an episode.
Yeah.
And so she says, "Well, honey, maybe it could be an episode." And Lou goes, "No, no, we already did an episode where Ray dropped his keys down a heating grate. We've already done this episode. This is just something shitty that happened.
A useless catastrophe. Yeah, completely.
Yeah, we've already done that episode. So
Oh,
no, we can't get anything out of this."
that is hilarious. So the writer's room, I'm always fascinated by the writer's room. How was it being in that writer's room?
Well, every writer's room is different, and it's
Yeah.
really dictated by who's running the show. You kind of take on the personality of the showrunner, and we all sort of kind of naturally conform. It's kind of like a bird's nest in a way, where there's a mama bird, and you're all chirping to try to get a worm from the showrunner, which means you kind of have to kind of tune into what the showrunner responds to. Like Phil Rosenthal, is a big foodie, and he's actually got a show on Netflix called Somebody Feed Phil. So he was always a foodie. So he loved food jokes. So I wasn't necessarily a fooder, but I kind of learned, okay, is there a food reference I can make to get something into the script? And that's kind of how you adapt. But it doesn't exist as much anymore. And this is the kind of thing I was talking about at the beginning of the show. for the other writers. The writers' room has been reduced, and a lot of it, because of the pandemic, was done on Zoom.
Yes.
It's just not the same as being in a room with people and having, we're doing Zoom and we're focused on a conversation. Zoom is good when you're focused on one topic and then you're out, but there's an intensity to that that's hard to sustain. In a writer's room, you're having side conversations, or you're, taking a break and going to the bathroom, and then you're talking to somebody in the hallway. And there's a lot of other socialization that goes on there, where you're just deepening relationships in ways that they can't be done over Zoom. So there are a lot of Zoom rooms now, and the rooms are smaller because they're cutting back and on these show orders and everything. So, I was lucky enough to be in the boom times in the 90s through the early 2000s, through the late 2000s, actually,
Yes.
2010s, to, be in rooms where there were, 7, 8, 9, 12 writers in the room.
Wow.
Sometimes it can get crowded, but then again, it's, that we had to have that many writers because we were doing 22 episodes a year.
Wow, that's a lot.
Well, it's in the old days, in the 50s, they would do 39 episodes. And then, basically 22. But sometimes with Raymond, we did 24, 26
Okay.
episodes, just because we just had to keep feeding the machine. But now what's interesting is that with streaming, TV series are no longer kind of self-contained series. It's sequential because it's binge watching. And
Yeah.
creatively, it's kind of interesting because you can kind of, when you did a pilot in the old system, you kind of had to pack everything into the pilot. You had to meet all of the characters. You had to find out what they were all about, what all the relationships are about. And so a lot of pilots were kind of stilted because there was too much exposition.
Yes.
But in the streaming, when it was sequential, you could start something at the beginning of a relationship and watch it develop and add new characters per episode and not have to jam everything into one. And that was creatively kind of interesting, but ultimately limiting, because all of these series now, like you say, Ted Lasso, which was
Mm-hmm.
wildly popular, it's like a long movie. It's kind of like, Ted Lasso is about the ingenuous guy coming in and to all this very cynical world, and he turns, eventually, after the end of the season, he turns all the cynical people around to his positive way of thinking. And then once you've done that, the second season, it's like a sequel. That's like a whole movie. It's just a very long movie because it's coming to this end point.
Yes.
And once these characters have changed, and you've got to gin up another conflict to have a second season.
That
And
is so true. Yes, it's not like the same thing,
yeah,
even though it evolves, like the characters and relationships do evolve in a traditional sitcom. But this is like, you're right.
yeah,
You have to like start almost like a new show on
shows
season
like
two.
Raymond, Seinfeld, all the shows that we're most familiar, our generation is familiar with, they're all self-contained. You don't have to
Yeah.
see one before to understand what's going on in this one, or
Yes.
and we would have little mini arcs and things of 2 or 3 episodes where something was happening, but nothing that was life-changing throughout the throughout the season. So in a traditional sitcom that I grew up on, the second season was always was the best season,
Hmm.
because you had a handle on the premise, you knew what the actors could do, you knew which characters clicked with each other, and you hadn't written all the stories yet. So you ask anybody in that tradition, the second season is the best. But in the streaming tradition, the sequential stuff, second season is hard because it's like doing a sequel to a successful movie.
Absolutely. It's like almost like a sub show.
Yeah, it's a sequel.
Yeah.
It's a sequel, but it's a long sequel to, you got to come up with a whole nother thing that has an endpoint. And like, you watched the third season of Ted Lasso, and it was just a soap opera. It was just completely lost. It was
Yeah.
still popular because people love those characters, but they loved it was all about who's hooking up with who, and there was no real, you know, narrative center to it.
Yeah.
And so, it would have to end after how many, they probably had 30 episodes, total. That was about it because you couldn't sustain it. So even a show that's wildly successful like that, 30 episodes. So the writers' rooms are smaller, the payouts are smaller. It's all a different world than what I came up through. And again, is why we get back to the theme. It's not that I didn't have challenges. We all have challenges. And if
Of
I were to
course.
talk about having a challenge, you all have, small little failures. You pitch, when I was on Seinfeld, it was very hard to pitch a story to Larry that he would accept because
Really?
he's a genius and he was very
Yeah.
picky. And I'm less than a genius. And so it
Stop
was
it.
hard
You
to
are
get
humble. That's what you are. You're very humble. Stop it.
it. Well,
You are a genius.
for reason, no, well, please, no,
I
that's
think you are.
the case. But it was very hard to get a story by him. And I remember my friend Bill Masters and I pitched the story. We thought this has to go, and didn't happen. He didn't go for it.
Didn't go for it. Yeah.
But so the next day, I came back with another story idea that I just thought up of that next day, and I called a couple of the other two of the other writers and said, "Hey, you want to join me on this? Let's do this." And we pitched it to Larry, and he said, and it wasn't like a whole elaborate pitch that I had done the day before with Bill. We just said, "How about this log line?" And he said, "Okay, let's do that." And I think one of the reasons he did it was because I didn't mope after being rejected. I just picked
Oh.
myself up off the ground and went at it again, knowing full well I could, get knocked down again. And when I say knocked down, that's over dramatic. Larry was very, gentle in his rejections. But uh, I think this has kind of engendered me because I'm a jock. I played a lot of sports. I played football.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
I still played baseball and everything. And thank you, Blue Horseshoe. Yes, it was stellar. And I was only a small part of it. But the idea that you lose a game and you come back, or you miss a tackle, or you drop a ball, and if you think about that, you're going to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
So the sports mentality for me is, okay, put that aside. Next thing. And so that's kind of what I did. I used that kind of mentality for that, and we got it. We managed to get an episode on the air, and I think, and I remember Larry saying to me, "You came right back." And I think that's probably one of the reasons he accepted it, because he was like, I can't do this with this guy again.
Oh, that's so funny. I love that story.
Yeah. So
So
those little challenges is what I learned to overcome. And
yeah,
if I've gained any success is because of that attitude. It's like you just got to keep
keep
piling right
going.
there. Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
think being an athlete, used to be an athlete. I was a competitive swimmer. So it's the same. It's that mentality. It's like, just keep going. You
yeah,
fall and it's okay. Get back up and keep going, keep running, keep
yeah,
swimming, keep doing whatever you need to do. So that's great. It served you really well in the industry because it is a very tough industry.
yeah. You can't, and you can't. You have to learn not to take things personally.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of it is very personal, and then when you're talking about creativity and your story or your idea, and this person who has the power to say yay or nay doesn't like it, for whatever reason, this
Yeah.
business is 99% rejection. And so
Yeah.
when I talk to young people about getting into the business, I say, you have to understand, I've had a very successful career, but it's still 99% rejection.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to stomach that. You have to be able to kind of put that aside and do the next thing.
I'm Latino like Grace, and I am teaching her how to golf. But I don't know shit about golf. I had to Google it. Still, I want to get in her pants. That's my thing. So, let's get ready to trick her into doing me.
You can hear the rain, and it's okay, honey, because it's kind of like a background music. I like it. I hate it.